Purple Daily on Score North and ScoreNorth.com.
Vikings Vent Line on Purple Daily, that is. What's going on, everyone? Declan Goff here. Break down another episode of Vent Line. We're inching closer to the regular season for the Vikings. Week 1, like 5 weeks away here, September 11th, against the Green Bay Packers at home. Of course, Vikings Vent Line is a year-round program during the Vikings season. We obviously bring fans on right after the game to talk about it. So we love to do that. We're excited to do that. We're like 5 weeks from being back at full strength for Vikings Vent Line. And if you'd like to be on one of these off-season editions, though, I'm going to talk to my guys Jay and Dave here in just a little bit. You can shoot me an email. It's vikingsventline@gmail.com for the YouTube audience. It's scrolling across the bottom of the screen right there for you. vikingsventline@gmail.com. Would love to get you in queue. I'd love talking to all the Vikings fans throughout this season. Of course, we are presented by TCL. Enjoy more of what you love with TCL with the football season coming around the corner here. Why don't you go pick yourself up a TCL television? They have great HD stuff, built-in Rokus. It's very convenient. None of those like 3 different remotes. Everything's right there. Go get yourself a TCL television. Vikings Vent Line. Excited to talk to Jay and Dave here. We're going to talk some training camp stuff. We're going to talk some Vikings expectations. So let's not waste any more time here. Let's get our guys in here. Let's get Jay in. Let's get my guy Dave in. Jay, you've been on Vent Lines. You've been on Write That Downs before. Happy to have you back on the show, my man. Welcome back.
Hey, thank you. I'm glad to be back. Glad I could sneak in the last hour and get in here.
Yeah, a little behind the scenes here. I had to get Jay on last second. One of my other Vikings Vent Line guests wasn't able to come on, so instead I did a little waiver claim for Jay here for your fantasy football nerds. And Jay's going to be a starter in the lineup here for me after the last second here. So I appreciate you coming on, Jay.
That's
Dave,
scary. No
up,
training camp, nothing.
What's going on,
nice
Dave?
to meet you, Declan, man. Thanks for having me on. Lifelong dream to be on the Vet Line.
where are you about? Where are you about, Dave? Where you living at?
I'm originally from South Dakota, but I've lived in the South since like '98. I live in South Florida.
So South Florida, where you watched the infamous 1998 meltdown against the Falcons.
I watched that. Yeah, actually, I watched that when I moved to Fort Myers, Florida.
Okay.
Yeah, I was in Lakeland, Florida, actually, visiting my girlfriend, and her dad hated Randy Moss, and I had to sit there watching him hate Randy Moss while we're up 2 touchdowns. I'm like, yeah, this is great. No, not good. It wasn't a good experience. Everything about that day was terrible.
Every Vikings fan has like that same timeline of that misery heartbreak. It's 98. Sometimes it's 41 donut. Sometimes it's 09 against the Saints. Sometimes it's now, for new fans, it might be the Eagles debacle in 2018. There's a heartbreak in all of them, and we're all just trying to see the Vikings win a Super Bowl before we die. The mission statement here at Purple Daily. Jay, what was your first conscious memory as a Vikings fan? Do you remember?
So I'm actually a 3rd-generation Vikings fan. Grandmother got on right in 1961. So Vikings since I was born. My first conscious memory as a Vikings fan is the hilarious debacle, the 20-20 overtime game against the Green Bay Packers, where I think Favre sends it up, the ball gets knocked down or whatever, lands on the Packer. He's not touched, and he runs into the end zone. It was so ridiculous. That was my first conscious memory as a Vikings fan.
I had forgotten that memory, but thank you for bringing it up again.
Yeah, that's a good pull, but at the same time, right? It makes you like, oh yeah, remember when that one stunk? Yeah,
and that was a very good precursor to what I should expect going forward.
No kidding, dude. Boys, let's talk a little training camp here. Training camp's rolling on. They got the pads on finally. As I said on the top of the show, obviously we're like 5 weeks from the week 1 opener. So I am curious your guys' thoughts on training camp. Now we actually get to talk about football that's happening. Jay, I'll start with you. What's some player or anything that you've seen so far from social media clips or following the team, listening to this podcast? What are you most excited for at training camp so far?
I am very excited about our 3-deep wide receiver room. KJ Osborn is somebody that even from the beginning of last year, after the Cardinals game, seeing how he was able to just break away his game winner against the Carolina Panthers, I thought was a fantastic route, fantastic catch, good throw by Kirk. He had a very sneakily, very good year that went under the radar, I think, nationally. And I think he's somebody that's ready to just break in as a pseudo Jake Reed role into this next season. And we could have 3 receivers go over 1,000 yards and have 8+ touchdowns each this year. KJ had, I think, 7 last year. We had 7, 10, and Thielen had 14. So we were close.
Yeah, KJ took a big step forward to your point. I mean, he got a decent rookie year. They wanted him to be a returner. It wasn't really working out too well. Then he steps up, has a great camp. Like, sometimes I think, and KJ Osborn's a perfect example of this, is we kind of forget about, players in training camp. And then all of a sudden guys work their ass off. And then KJ Osborn basically becomes this great offensive starter for the Vikings out of basically nowhere. To your point, catches like 6 touchdowns, grabs like 50 balls. And if that's even just the floor of like what his day in day out seasons look like for the next few years, like you would take that. But also, like, is there a next step to his game? Thielen's missed some time with injuries. He's still a productive red zone guy, but obviously age is starting to catch up to him. Is there even more to like his game? And I think that's what's super exciting to watch about him. And to your point, 3 deep. Yeah, obviously 98 with Jake Reed, Randy Moss, Chris Carter. That was awesome for the Vikings. They've had really good 2 wide receiver sets before, right? Like they've had that in their history, but it's been a while since the old 3 deep with Jake Reed kind of solidified those things. Dave, how about you, man? With training camp now rolling on, what player are you kind of watching? Who has the most to prove? What are your training camp thoughts so far?
Well, he pretty much beat me to KJ Osborn. I'll expand a little, but then I'll pick another player. But KJ showing up in practice, the fact that Wes Phillips is talking about his blocking ability and making sure he's more in the slot, which I think he's going to be better suited for. Because I think when he backed up Thielen and was on the outside, I don't think he performed as well as we hoped he would. But the return ability, I'm seeing he didn't show it in his first season, and he's trying it again this season. I'm not sure that's going to work out, but the other guy who I wanted to draft, like trade down and draft in the 18-20 mark was Andrew Booth Jr. I had this excruciating pain watching us pass on him like twice, then trade down to where I didn't think we were going to get him, and then trade back up to get him. And that saved at the point, just like you guys, I think I saw your watch party with Surly Brewing Company, and you guys standing up and say, what do you guys think about drafting Lewis Cine? And we're like, nobody heard of him, right? Because we had no idea we were going to go that deep into safety, right? But Andrew Booth Jr. still being there at 42 saved that draft for me. And then now to think about it, revisiting Lewis Cine, seeing Andrew Booth Jr., and then getting Ed Ingram out of this deal, I think, and now to see these guys get opportunities as rookies when they weren't getting it under Zimmer, I'm excited that we're putting the best players out on the field. So that's where I'm at.
Yeah, it's interesting to see how this draft class plays out, right? Like last year's, it was mostly held in hostage. Zimmer didn't really want to play them. And there was players like in witness protection program, essentially. And now KOC and Kwesi get their first crack at their roster evaluation. And I'm curious to see how those guys kind of, fit into the fold, right? Like Lewis Cine and Andrew Booth are going to be 2 defensive players. And I know we're going to talk about the defense here in just a little bit. But those are 2 players that have a lot to prove here at training camp. And Booth has kind of been, I feel like, throughout the first week or so, the star of the show at training camp, right? Like he's brash, he's making plays, he's getting in people's faces. If they can find like another stud cornerback, like they got out of like with Cam Dantzler, with 2 years ago, if they add him and Dantzler and Booth take steps forward, well, all of a sudden the cornerback room looks a lot better than it did, at least on paper. I think we'll have to wait to see how it plays out a little bit as the season progresses. But good news for the Vikings if they actually have 2 legitimate cornerbacks there. Dave, what did you? So you were circling Andrew Booth like in the first round, like you wanted him to go round 1.
I thought he was the 3rd best cornerback in the game or in the draft, and I loved him over that Florida, and then I forget the other guy starts with an M, but I just thought he was the 3rd best cornerback in the league, and coming in the draft. And what I thought about him is that, I mean, he would just burst to the ball in the running game or on swing passes, things like that. And before the guy would turn his head, he was tackling him. He played with reckless abandon. He had the one-handed Odell Beckham catch, and that was amazing. So he's got great ball skills, great coverage skills, great tackling ability in open field. I thought he was the whole package, and man, it's since Winfield, he's like Winfield with speed. Mm-hmm. That's the way I felt about him.
Reckless abandon. I love that.
That's my high school football coach. Rest in peace, Mr. Morrell. But that's what my high school football coach used to say, play with reckless abandon.
Jay going with an acapella football sounder there too. I appreciate that. That was Jay's a longtime listener of Purple Daily. He was able to hit that sounder for me just with them. Yeah, I think both those corners can be awesome for the Vikings. If Cam Dancer takes a step forward, Andrew Booth, yeah, to your point, and if he really develops, and he might be the steal of the draft. The only reason he fell so far was because of that injury, and he had a first round grade on him. So if the Vikings are able to get that, that's awesome. It actually transitions perfect to our next point here, boys, because the Vikings defense the last few years has been pretty brutal. And yeah, Daniil Hunter's only been on the field for like 8 of those possible 32 games or so. But now that they've got a couple new rookies here, they have a new scheme. They add Zadarius Smith. Jay, I'll start with you. Do you think this Vikings defense can rebound now in 2022?
I don't know if I want to call it exactly a rebound, but I do think that they're going to take some serious steps forward. I'm very curious to see how this new defensive scheme works out. I always go back to what I like seeing from a defense, and the textbook example of this is, in my opinion, the best game of 2020 or 2020, the COVID year. I think it was week 4 or 5, Cardinals versus the Seahawks, and watching the Cardinals defense on the 2-minute Russell Wilson's 2-minute drive, where they have all 11 guys on the line of scrimmage. You don't know who's dropping, and they sack Russell Wilson with a 3-man rush. And I was just having, what do you want to call it? A brain blast, nerd blast.
Yeah.
I was just gushing over what I was seeing from their defense, how you didn't know what was going on. And you could tell Russell Wilson was completely flustered. And that's what I want to see out of our defense is just quarterbacks, good veteran quarterbacks like Russell Wilson, just completely flustered and completely overwhelmed in crunch time where every single second matters. And that's exactly what the Cardinals did.
Yeah, that new scheme and look from Ed Donatel, right, going to the 3-4 is going to be interesting. Just how it dials up a lot of different pressures, and if the Vikings cornerback room and defensive backs don't take that step forward, or if it's going to be a long play, they got to figure out ways to get after the QB, right? Like that has to be, I think, their bread and butter in the defense. If it has any lick of being successful, I know they spend a lot of money on getting Harrison Phillips here. They keep Dalvin Tomlinson, so they need to obviously stop the run, which teams have been running up against them like crazy. But if they kind of stop those two things, it basically stops the bleeding, right? Like I don't think that they can be an elite defense overnight, but can they return back to being at least average as a whole from in terms of points allowed and yards allowed, while also still being a team that gets after the quarterback at a high rate? Dave, what do you think, man? Do you think this defense has room to significantly improve in 2022?
Well, my biggest fear was going to a 3-4 defense, and I heard in years past, and this is old adages about, hey, it takes a few years to be able to switch the personnel to a 3-4 defense. I think we've actually done it faster in as close to you can in 1 year as you can. We brought in guys like a McLeod, a Mintz, and we have Wanham that all played outside linebacker in DN in college. So bringing in those back end guys to maybe fill some of that backup, potential of being deeper on defense that we haven't had in the past. I was really worried about linebacker, but not so much anymore. I think guys like some of the Robinson coming back. I thought he was a monster in college. I thought it was a great draft pick. And then where is he? We haven't seen him. I think he got injured prior to last year, so we didn't get to see time. But the fact that we brought in Zadarius Smith as the cornerstone of our free agent class, we added a run stuffer like Harrison Phillips and Jordan Hicks. Hopefully Tomlinson rebounds. That's my big deal. Is hey, we were terrible against the run, and adding the Hicks and Phillips, and then hopefully Tomlinson comes back and has a good what we expected out of him. But adding speed with the rookies like Sean, Booth, Asamoah, even a Caleb Evans is starting to excite me a little bit. Yeah, maybe a little Pollyanna about this, but that's old. I heard that once and I thought I'd use it on the show. But just to be a little drinking the purple Kool-Aid a little bit, I think we can jump up into that top 12 defense. I'm not saying we're a top 5 or a top 10, but I think at times we could be a top 12 because I don't think anybody's got a book on us, and we're going to surprise some people. So I think that in with minds like Donatel and Pettin, who took the Packers to 3 NFC title games with this defense, and unfairly fired, I think. I think we got a lot of things, and he's the reason why Zadarius Smith's on our team. So I give these guys a lot of credit, and we can turn this around pretty good in 1 year, just like we did when Zimmer came in and turned it around pretty good in 1 year.
I have.
Go ahead, Jay.
Sorry,
go ahead.
I have something to add to your point, Dave. with our linebackers. I think a lot of people forget that my guy EK played in a 3-4 at UCLA. So he's got experience in the 3-4, and he's got experience rushing the passer. I mean, he had 5 sacks last year, but he's
I
got
think
that
he could play
experience too.
anywhere.
And then Jordan Hicks as well next to him from the Arizona Cardinals. So I think we got, to your point, a lot of guys that have familiarity with this type of defense. And I think it was a
Dye's
good
getting a
base.
chance now. Where I've
Who's
never heard his name until this year. And then, there was one. I guess $3 million for an Anthony Barr, and now we have a 3-4 defense, and we couldn't afford $3 million to get Anthony
know.
Barr back.
Oh man, and
I wanted to
Anthony
give him a
Barr is such a
chance
good
in a
rusher.
3-4.
I know.
I'm a little down on Barr, but I wanted to see him in 3-4 because he was a
Yeah.
monster coming out of college. And I don't even want to talk about passing on Aaron Donald to take Anthony Barr.
Right.
And play him out of position for God knows how many years we've had him.
Dave, you brought up the Harrison Phillips, Dalvin Tomlinson thing, and not being able to stop the run has just killed the Vikings the last few years. And I think I talked about this on Vent Line last week with a couple of fans, that Vikings fans kind of got spoiled for like basically 15, 20 years, right? Between the Williams wall, Jared Allen, they had Ray Edwards, they had Everson Griffin, they had Linval Joseph. They had so many great players on their defensive
Greenway.
line. Greenway was a stud, right? Like Eric Kendricks, to your point too. Anthony Barr at his peak was pretty damn good. They had so many different players, and they can come up with so many different combinations, whether it was a linebacker, defensive end, or tackle, to stop the run. And the last few years, I mean, everyone's just running right down the Vikings' throat, essentially. And I feel like sometimes we think, oh, it's just run defense. It's not going to be a big deal. Like, whatever, don't prioritize it or don't put a big emphasis in it. Well, if you're giving up like 140 yards a game, that's going to make the opposing offense a hell of a lot easier to accomplish their task and finding 6 points. So if they can stop that run, stop that bleeding, and get after the quarterback, I think the Vikings have a good enough defense, and this is obviously depending on what the offense is, what it is, which should be a top 5, top 10 offense, that should be good enough for a formula and a stew that makes the Vikings a playoff team. I think that's really all you can ask for from their defensive side of the ball. And, Dave, you said Ed Donatel coming here, and a veteran dude who has been there and done that, worked in a ton of different systems. He's worked with a lot of different players, a lot of good ones too. And Kevin O'Connell's basically kind of outsourced that to Ed Donatel to a degree, but for all the good reasons. He's basically saying, hey, I'm still the head coach of this football team. They're coming up with new schemes. They've changed things up, but you're going to handle that part of the ball for me. You're a veteran dude. He's still an inexperienced head coach, and he's going to be learning on the ropes a little bit. I love the move of bringing in a guy like Ed Donatel. It makes life so much easier for that Vikings defense to have a veteran dude hanging out there. Boys, what are your expectations for the Vikings in 2022? I've been asking everyone this on Vent Line throughout the last few months. Now that training camp is here, we're getting closer and closer to the season. We start, to Dave's point, sipping the purple Kool-Aid a little bit more because we had some guys in training camp and pads and whatnot. Jay, I'll start with you. What are your expectations for the Vikings this year?
All right, so I was all in on the KOC hire. I was getting hyped up, and I kind of had to temper myself a little bit because we can't just expect a first-year coach to go win the NFC Championship. But I do expect our team to compete with the Packers for the North. And my expectation is that if it has to come down to week 17, that we are at least in the mix, 10-7, 11-6. I just want us to be up there, be competitive, and not have a mini heart attack every time we go into a game with something to lose on the line. That's really my expectation for this team, and I'm really hoping that our coaching staff can kind of change our fan culture of being nervous every time we have something on the line.
My God, that 2-minute defense last year was just historically bad, right? And it just made you sweat even more. And like Vikings fans are already naturally nervous, right? They're already naturally waiting for the shoe to drop, right? They're living in a glass house. They know how that works. And last year did not help anything. And to your point, of kind of cleaning that stuff up and just not being complete sieve in the last 2 minutes of a half or a game, and just knowing how to react to that kind of things. And Zimmer, unfortunately, it'd be one thing if that was happening to Kevin O'Connell this year and it hadn't happened to a veteran team in the past, but it was happening to a coach that had been leading the team for 8 years and a lot of different players who had been there and done that before, and they could never figure out a way to stop that. And I think that comes down to coaching. And eventually you'd like to think that with a different change in philosophy, that should even itself out, to your point. Are they going to be perfect in 2-minute drills? Are they going to lead the league in no points allowed? No. But if they can cut that at least in half, my God, it makes things a hell of a lot easier. Dave, what about you, man?
You made a good point, Declan, that you guys probably covered on one of your shows at one time, but there's that stat out there since was it 2000, 686 teams. We were ranked 686, so dead last, and giving up points in the last 2 minutes of the half and the last minutes of the game. That is historically bad. That forget yards, forget points in a game. That is historically bad. And yeah, it's centered around coaching. And that's why, the point that he made that coaching has a lot to do with it. But the fact that we were a top 5 offense that was top 10, and that's because we were doing things like on first down, we'd run the ball. If we passed the ball on first down, we ran the ball no matter what on second down because our nepotism that just infected the Vikings. At one time, we had 3 father-son duos as coaches, and we have a offensive coordinator that thinks he's probably going to get fired if he passes 3 times in a row. So there's no way he's going to pass. I'm sitting at a sports bar going, we're going to run the ball here. We're going to run the ball here. And they're wondering, how do you know that? Because we passed on first down. There's no way he's going to pass again. So the other team sees that. And we were just so, they knew what we were doing. They could just play for it. But the fact that I think we've turned this defense around in personnel, we're not going to be that bad. We're not going to be, we're not going to be telegraphing what we're doing every game. The fact that on offense, we're bringing the Rams, who were a Rams type offense that was like top of the league in 11 personnel. They were top 11 personnel. And as far as they were, top at, speeding up the offense or playing no huddle in the league. And the Vikings were at the bottom of both those categories. And nobody has a book on us. And that's why I love that we're playing the Packers the first game. One, because of what Aaron Rodgers did last year in the first game of the season. I hope he repeats it.
I love it. Jay, what were you about to say before I cut you off there?
I have a couple stats to go along with what Dave said about our record-breaking end of half performance. So I think the one's been floating around that if we didn't let people score on us at the end of halves and the end of games, we'd be like 15-2. That's absolutely not realistic. But somebody else, one of the podcasters that I watch, said that if we were league average, the Vikings would have been 11-6, 12-5 in that area. If we were league average in end of half scoring, which absolutely comes down to coaching. And the offense can't be just completely devoid of blame on that stat because, we led the league in 3 and outs. We also led the league on second down runs, second and long runs, third and long. So, but absolutely, coaching played a huge part of that.
How far behind the chains we were. We led the league in
back. Yep.
God, I guess I didn't give my prediction. So I've had said 12-5. I said our floor is 10. Our ceiling is 13, but I feel a little bit better about the Eagles game. So I may say our ceiling's 14, but I don't want to get too crazy. But we were a 12-5 team last year. And we were a 12-5 team last year. If our defense was just 15th.
Right.
And guess what? The Rams were 15th and they were 12-5 with an offense that could be, pretty comparable as ours.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think expectations wise, I think 10 wins is fair. I think they can get to 10. Anything above that, I think would be even more successful. I think they should. Jay, you said in your expectations that you expect them to compete with the Packers. I expect them to compete with the Packers too. I love they get them in week 1. Just set that tone early. Hopefully, you walk away week 1 with the win. It's going to feel damn good. So that's all you can ask for, basically, is if you start the season off early with a big win, it's going to make life so much easier for the rest of the year. And I expect them to be a double-digit win team. I expect the offense to be top 5, top 10. That's kind of my bare minimum expectations. I want to see if Kevin O'Connell, who I do think can do it, if he's capable of turning this offense around. I think those are just my borderline expectations. Like, can this offense at least be noteworthy and something that you just can't miss, right? You can't miss out on this Vikings offense. It's going to be a blast. That's kind of my expectations for this season. Boys, before I wrap up, any shout outs or last takes you'd like to give here on Vent Line? Jay, I'll go to you.
All right. Well, I don't actually have anybody to shout out today, so I'm going to shout out you guys at Purple Daily for always keeping us entertained. I will say that I've seen a lot of comments about, especially targeted at Sports Dad, about how he brings the negativity. But I really appreciate that the negativity can be showcased because not everything is sunshine and rainbows. And we should always hold our sports teams accountable because that's how they get better. If we just pretend that we're good and pretend that everything's great in the world, then we're just settling for mediocrity. And
Amen.
I would like to see a Super Bowl before I die.
That's all we want, right? Dave, how about you, dude? What about you? Any final takes or anyone you want to shout out here before we wrap up?
Well, I do regular wellness checks on my mother because I want to have her see a Super Bowl before she dies. So I was doing that every day in 2017. We're almost there, Mom. We're almost there. But although I really appreciate you guys, and I've been listening for about 6 months now, I kind of found the YouTube Vikings, sphere a little late in my life. But I want to give a shout out to a guy that you brought on the Vent Line recently. RAP, I call him MC Rap or the Purple MLK because he's trying to bring all the Viking fans together. That's over on Purple Pocket Podcast. I had the pleasure of doing a live show with him over there. My show is Minnesota Sports Talk, and I appreciate the opportunity to come on your show. This was fun, lifelong dream, except my life, 6 months, I guess. My YouTube life was 6 months. So I appreciate it, guys, and I watch your show regularly, and say hi to Judd for me.
It's actually really crazy to think like YouTube is like this this opening and gateway to all three of us, Mackie, Judd, and myself, had no idea like how big Vikings fans were outside of Minnesota. Like it was naive, I guess, to think it to a degree, but we were shocked at how many Vikings fans don't live in MN. I mean, neither of you guys are residing in MN right now, and I would say the majority of the Vent Line fans that either come on this show or come on during the season are not living in Minnesota. They have Minnesota connections to a degree, but they just love the purple. And to your point, both your guys' point, we just want to see the Vikings win a Super Bowl before we die. And there's this big community, Dave, like you said, on YouTube that exists all over the place. People starting podcasts, people just talking about the Vikings. It is kind of funny how it all works out. And I guess shout out to YouTube for that too.
It's a funny thing though, how I met Rap that you had on your show. He was talking about why doesn't Kirk Cousins take any of the blame, and I commented on his chat and I go, what do you mean he doesn't take any blame? That's all he takes. And then and then we basically got together, says, we should do a show together. And like a week later, we're live on his podcast. So it's funny how we got together.
Look at that. Fantastic. Purple Daily bringing other podcasters together. I love that. That's awesome. Jay, Dave, thank you guys for coming on Vent Line this week.
Thank you for having me on.
Come on during the season, by all means. Jay, you've been on before. Dave, come on during the regular season, by all means. We'll be ready to rock.
If you have me, man, I appreciate it.
I'll be on right after week 1 on Vent Line.
I love it.
I'll be in the emails.
Love that. Hey, hit the subscribe button for Daily Minnesota Sports Entertainment if you are consuming this show. We're on Apple. We're on Spotify. The Score North app is a central hub for all we do. This has been Vikings Vent Line, back at full strength on Monday.